Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, September 13th, 2024. The Bipartisan Itch to Tax Behavior. That's the title of an article by Veronique de Ruggie, the George Gibbs Chair in Political Economy and a Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Here are some of her insights. Republican Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance has been in the news for an old clip of him talking about how the tax code should punish adults without kids. While Vance's proposal probably aims to address demographic concerns, it represents a misguided approach that contradicts fundamental principles of economic freedom and fairness. Using the tax code to reward parents and punish non-parents is at odds with the idea of a neutral, efficient tax system. In an ideal and fair world, the tax base would be broad and taxed at a low rate. People making the same income should be paying the same level of taxes no matter how they choose to live their lives. Unfortunately, the tax code is neither fair nor neutral. It punishes and rewards all sorts of behaviors based on what the government officials decide is good or bad. Lots of evidence exists showing that government programs of all sorts meant to encourage, reward, or stimulate usually fail. Tax breaks for homeowners mean that renters pay more money for the same amount of housing. People who can afford an electric vehicle can secure a tax break that others cannot. Using the tax code as a tool for social engineering is misguided. It leads to economic inefficiencies and infringes on individual liberty. Rather than doubling down on the problematic aspects of our current system, we should be working towards comprehensive reform. Only then can we hope to see taxes as something that truly serves the interests of all Americans, regardless of their personal choices. These tax breaks for some are not just unfair to the taxpayers who don't get them, they also turn our tax code into a complicated mess that requires many millions of collective hours to comply with. Instead of adding more complexity and bias, we should be moving in the opposite direction, toward a simpler, flatter, and more neutral code that treats all taxpayers equally. In conclusion, Mr. Ruggie sets forth the attributes of what a good tax system for the U.S. should be and gives many examples of how our income payroll tax system fails in every way. Except for the elites and their minions, no one disagrees with her statement. Instead of adding more complexity and bias, we should be moving in the opposite direction, toward a simpler, flatter, and more neutral code that treats all taxpayers equally. The tax proposals of former President Trump and Vice President Harris further highlight the problems with the present income payroll tax system. Ms. Harris wants to reverse the Trump 2017 tax cuts, increase the income tax rates, and eliminate many deductions. She also wants to change the income payroll tax system to benefit the people who support her and those whom she favors. For example, many in the Harris camp want to eliminate capital gains taxes and make those who profit from trading capital assets pay ordinary income rates on those profits rather than paying the much lower capital gains rate. On the other hand, Trump proposes to extend the 2017 tax cuts, but he can't make them permanent. Any changes he could make can and will be overturned the next time the opposition party regains control of the government. The big losers in this entire system are the American people. Now, it's inevitable that control of the government will alternate back and forth between the two major parties. As long as the tax code is subject to being manipulated to achieve political goals, there will be massive instability in our tax laws. Long-range planning, especially for businesses, is impossible because no one knows from one year to the next what the tax law will be. Now, why do supposedly intelligent people in D.C. continue to let this insane income payroll tax system continue? Well, as the Deep Throat character says to Woodward and Bernstein in All the President's Men, follow the money. The two things the government elites crave above all else are power over people's lives and money. and the income payroll tax system provides them with plenty of both. Now, here's some of the groups that reap tremendous financial benefits from the current tax system. First, members of Congress. They know that all they have to do is threaten to change the tax law, and donations will pour in from both those who would benefit from the change and would like to see it implemented, and also from those who would be hurt by it and don't want it enacted. Washington lobbyists. A significant portion of the $4 billion received by federal lobbyists in 2023 was related to the income payroll tax system. D.C. think tanks. Many D.C. think tanks owe their very existence to the income payroll tax system. They make a lot of money doing study after study on the tax system and coming up with recommendations on how to improve it. The CPAs, who make 90% of their income preparing income tax returns, handling IRS audits, and advising taxpayers. Then there are the tax attorneys, who routinely charge $700 to $1,500 an hour advising clients on how to deal with the income payroll tax system. There are the various online and in-person tax preparation companies, large corporations who see a complex tax system as a competitive advantage over smaller competitors. They have the financial resources to lobby for favorable tax treatment and to hire the best professional help in dealing with an abundantly complex set of tax laws. And finally, there are bureaucrats who hold jobs that wouldn't exist if we didn't have the incomprehensible, ever-changing tax system. When you add to this list the true believers who want to use the income payroll tax system to further their agenda, this is a formidable group of powerful people who are adamantly opposed to adopting a saner and fairer tax system, as Ms. DeRugi recommends. This is why, despite the overwhelming support of the American people, the fair tax has yet to become law. And it's not like the people in D.C. don't know about the fair tax. They do indeed know about it. They'll even admit that the fair tax is so simple that everyone can understand it and comply with it without having to hire expensive professional help. They know the fair tax shows the true cost of the federal government on every retail receipt, so all of us can understand how much we're paying in federal taxes and determine if the benefits that we're receiving are worth the cost. They know the fair tax helps U.S. companies compete with foreign competitors and not be required to move overseas in order to stay in business. It keeps jobs in the U.S. rather than exporting them to other countries. The fair tax permanently establishes the solvency of Social Security and Medicare, eliminates special treatment for any group of taxpayers. It benefits lower income groups more than the present income payroll tax system does, and it's fair. The fair tax eliminates the need to file tax returns, and it eliminates the need for the IRS. Plus, it allows each of us, not the elites and their minions, to determine how much federal tax we pay, and it's the largest transfer of power from D.C. to the people since the Constitution was adopted. D.C. is ignoring the one real solution that allows us to remain citizens and not subjects, the fair tax. The fair tax is simple, it's non-invasive, but most of all, it works. The American people will overwhelmingly support the fair tax if they're given the chance, and all of us will benefit from its enactment. The solution? Pass the fair tax. Now, why would D.C. pass the fair tax and give up an almost unlimited source of donations? Well, they won't, at least not voluntarily. The only way they will is if the rest of us demand it. Now, isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system and the IRS along with it? Now, there's going to be a vote on the fair tax in the House of Representatives. We now have the opportunity to force all members of the House to show where they stand. They can vote for the present income payroll tax system, or they can vote for the fair tax. They can support the corrupt income tax in the IRS, or they can vote to eliminate it. It can't be any simpler than that. They can hide the true cost of their government, or they can pass the fair tax and show everyone the true cost of government on every retail receipt. And finally, they can support the largest transfer of power from government to the people, the fair tax, or they can vote against it. Now, if members think the fair tax needs to be amended to address a problem, they can propose the change. Don't let them get away with rejecting the entire bill because it has a perceived flaw that can be easily addressed, and if it's a real flaw, corrected in the final bill. And don't think for an instant there aren't any flaws in the income tax. Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing or investing $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for Fair Taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to FAIRtax.org to invest in AFFT and help us pass the Fair Tax. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.